Hi and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about one of my favourite tools. It really is a gizmo, literally a coiling gizmo. Now these are used to decorate jewellery and your artwork in so many different ways, but I'm going to show you just a couple of quick examples of work that I've created utilising the wire coiling gizmo. So a Heady-esque design piece here has got lots of different segments of coiled wire in different gauges. This one is in bronze. I also have one in a silver-plated copper, utilising a couple of different techniques, including some gizmo coiling as well as other wire weaving. And then at the simpler end of the scale, I've got this lovely little sunstone piece, a piece of rough sunstone with just a single length of coiled wire circling around the outside of what would otherwise be a very simple prong set piece. So there's some of the ideas that you can use your gizmo coiled wire for. Again, in other projects such as your artwork, absolutely fantastic. Now, there are 3 or 4 different variations of the wire coiling gizmo, from a very, very basic, simple, just a long piece of metal with a U shape in it that sits in a handheld device, right up to the professional coiling gizmo, which is what I want to show you today. Now, normally we would attach this to a workbench, but what I have done, and what I do generally keep it in this fashion, is I've attached it to a plank of wood. So I'm just going to show you that now. So what you get with this is a series of long metal round rods. They're about 18 inches or 45 centimetres in length. And then you have 2 sections, which are clamped, as I say, in this case, to a piece of boarding. You've got a segment through which your rod will travel, and then it's able to move freely, as you've got little holes in the end there. And then at the other end you have a chuck and collet device which traps the rod, and a crank handle. Now, as I say, these have been put onto this plank for just moving around the house. It's really easy to hit yourself in the head with it, obviously, but it's really easy to keep it mobile, and you can work with it in a couple of different locations. If you're using different length rods, you just need to unclamp one of the pieces and then move it to the desired distance. Whoops, just whacked the other camera. So with this particular piece, you receive about 5 different gauge rods, and they're about 18 inches in length. I find that all a little bit more than I need, so I have opted to purchase additional rods in 12-inch or 30 centimetre lengths. So I'm just going to pop this down on the desk, and I will show you how to use this in a second. But before we move on, as well as showing you the pieces of jewellery which we've created using the wire coiling gizmo, I just want to show you a couple of pieces that I've made already, which I keep in a little bag, and they are ready to go onto any jewellery, really. You can even make lovely little torque necklaces just with a single coiled gizmo. So this is a 0.6mm gauge wire that's been coiled around a 1mm rod, and I will add some different dimension information in a moment. This is a finer gauge wire that's been coiled once and then twice, and then it's had a second segment of wire spiraled or helixed around the middle. And if you do that with a much heavier gauge of wire, you get quite a different effect. I will add some photographs and put them at the end of the video to show you big old handful that I keep handy there, just to add on to any jewellery pieces that I might want to work with as I move on. The 3 gauges of wire I'm going to talk to you about today. The lightest one I'm working with is 0.315mm. That's a 30 gauge. The heaviest one I'm looking at today is a 0.56mm, which is a 24 gauge. And I've made some samples using those wire gauges today. And the third one is one of my Desert Island wire gauges, which is a 0.4mm gauge, which equates to, it doesn't tell me, but I'll add the information in the video. So I've got a lovely big reel there of the 0.4mm gauge, and that's what I'll be using to demonstrate techniques with today. So the 2 rods that I purchased additionally are 12-inch or 30 centimetre lengths. One is 1mm in gauge and one is 1.2mm in gauge. Now these are quite fine rods, but I find that when you start coiling the coil, you end up with much more substantial pieces of wire to work with. So in my mind, I'd much rather work on a smaller core. So I'm going to show you how to use the wire coiling gizmo tool, and that means that perhaps the the zoom on my other camera might go a bit squiffy at occasion, so I'm going to do my best for you. And we're going to now bring into focus the far end down here. So you can see you've got 2 holes at this end, and I'm going to take one end of the rod and just post it through both of those holes. I'm just going to support that as I bring back into view the segment where all the excitement happens. So you've got a collet or a chuck at this end. I'm just going to try and get that to zoom properly to this distance. So you would undo the apertures on one side, feed in the rod, support that as centrally as you can, and then get that tightened up. I can never remember if it's lefty loosey, righty tighty with one of these. So just going to keep going until that rod sits as centrally as possible and then is nice and firmly housed in that position. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do is show you how to get a really good grip with the end of your finer gauge wire. So as I say, today I'm working with 0.4mm gauge. The alternative gauge I'm going to put in the video description below when I upload to YouTube later today. So what I've done is I've just folded over the end of my 0.4mm gauge a couple of times to make a little almost circle. Well, it's a very oval circle, but you know what I mean. And what I'm going to do, there are 3 gaps around where the rod is housed. If I just tilt that upwards, you should be able to see there are 3 little gaps in here. And what I'm going to do is post the little coiled section that I've made into one of those gaps, like so, so that when I start turning the crank handle, and I'll just bring the crank handle into view slightly if I can, seeing a bit more of my dusty desk today. So we're going to move that crank handle round, and hopefully you can see that that is biting and starting to generate a coil. So if I bring that back over to the center of the screen, hopefully you'll be able to see that that is starting to build up. Now I have recorded a very short segment in ultra close-up, which I'm going to ask my lovely editing staff to just put up here in the top of the screen in a moment, and it's the ultra close-up version of basically just popping the wires in, removing the wire once it's coiled from the rod. So what I'm going to do is, a couple of inches, and I'm going to go wrong on purpose to show you how to undo it if it does go wrong. Now, I am not really massively worried about my nails, but if you are, you might wish to wear some nice cotton gloves, or some people even have a false nail put on their thumbs to protect their skin and their nails underneath. But what I'm going to do is allow that to glide around just by coming up against my finger, or my thumb skin rather, and against the end of the nail. If that concerns you, you can find an alternative way to do that. You could even use a guitar plectrum I've heard people using before now. Occasionally, if you lose concentration, what will happen is the wire will fold back over itself, and I hope you can see that there. All you need to do is just gently keep hold of the crank handle end and undo that. And if you don't go too far, you can reuse that wire quite adequately without any problems to the finish of the coil or to the finish of the end product, or without harming. See, it's gone wrong and I wasn't even concentrating. There we go. So just wind that back a section, and then you are good to go. So I will, as I say, ask my husband to drop in the ultra zoomed section of video into the corner. So hopefully you're seeing how this all works. I'm going to bring my flush cutters in. Please don't use your flush cutters on a steel rod, but you can of course use it on the copper wire. So I'm just going to trim that away. Loosen off the collet or chuck ever so slightly. When you remove your coil from the rod, you need to push from the end. Now, if you have got a significant amount of coiling, this can be quite tough. If you pull from the end at the chuck or the collet end, if you start pulling it, the wire will open out and you will end up with a very loose, springy coil, which is probably not what you're looking for. So I'm going to pop the rod back into position and tighten that chuck or collet up. Get that nice and firmly in position. And if I show you just here, you can see that there's that little bit on the end that we just used to get a good grip. So I'm going to trim that away for now. Just pop that in my scraps pot for a second. It does pay you to just kind of keep on top of the tidiness, because sometimes it's a little bit more tricky to go back and cut away individual wires later on. What can happen is you try to cut one wire and you end up cutting the wrong bit, and it's all a little bit sad. So the next thing that we're going to do is find the end of the fine wire that's still on my reel. I'm always working from my reel because I don't know how much I want to use. And I'm going to put the coil that I've created onto the end of that wire and just allow it to come out of the way. And we're going to do exactly now as we did to begin with, just generate a bit of a position that can grab into the mouthpiece of the bit or the collet or the chuck, or however you want to know it. I'm not an engineer, I don't know the correct term, so I'm just going to post that into the slot and then start coiling as if we're making a brand new coil, exactly as we did a moment ago. Once I have got a good 1/4 inch or just under 1 centimetre of wire on the rod, I'm going to bring that coil that we generated up into view, and I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure just here to make sure that when I very slowly turn the crank handle, I can get that coil to start coiling. This is the beauty of the gizmo. You can do this multiple times. So some people I've seen do this with a drill instead of a hand-driven crank handle. I have not had much success with that. I'm not proficient with power tools. If that's something that you are good with, then go for your life. For me, that's a hard no. So I'm just going to make sure that that's evenly pressured or evenly spaced all the way along, and then when I get to the end of the coiled section, I'm going to very, very gently coerce that wire into creating another coil at the far end to match the amount that we put on at the beginning. And once we've got all the way there, we're going to cut away again like so, pop the wire out of the way, loosen the bit. And then, as I say, you will always want to push in this direction. If you're doing great big long lengths, it can be a little bit tricky, but if you pull from this end, you'll end up with a mess. So I'm just going to remove the rod and take it out of my device for now. Show you that up close. Hopefully that's in some kind of semblance of focus. And that by itself is quite a nice little bead. So what I tend to do is I build loads of these in the colour and gauges of wire that I think I will want to use for a pendant design, a chaos pendant or a more Heady-esque design, so that I have got way more than I think I'll actually need. Now, I know one thing that scares people is cutting these coils, so I want to show you that now with this piece that we've just made, that it is indeed possible. So if I pop the gizmo out of the way for a second, and then we'll refocus that camera, hopefully. I'll pop that down for a second, bear with me. Let's put this on the floor without dropping on my toes and breaking another toe. Let's get this all squared up and see if we can focus down here. Hopefully you can see that. So what we're going to do is just cut in the centre. Imagine we've got very, very long length just here, but we want 2 pieces that are much smaller in size. So I'm going to open that out slightly in the centre, and I'm just going to cut down at the middle like so. So what you'll see, let me just get that zoomed in for you for a second, and then see if we can focus. Doesn't want to focus on the right bit. What a joy. Okay, so let me drop that down. You've got a little bit of coiled wire at the end there, which is greater in size than the inner wire. So I'm just going to trim that away further down, like so. And you can see we've exposed some of that core wire. And what you would do then is just take some finer pliers and try and get that to just coil around a little bit. So these are not my regular pliers, I've lost them. So all I'm going to do is get that to return to its coiled position and then tidy it away. And what you will find is that is now a very useful but truncated piece of wire. So you can then thread that onto another core, and that can be used elsewhere in your designs if you need a smaller piece. Coming back up to this one, this is all a bit of an experiment for me today, trying to zoom in and focus on different parts, but I hope that this has been useful for you. I hope that you've enjoyed the demonstration, and in future demonstrations we're going to talk about how The last base that we made, the multi-purpose pendant back or base, we had a couple of different designs that we were looking at. In the next demonstration, what I want to show you how to do is to make little connectors or component parts with smaller gemstones. Let me grab some examples that you would then be able to use in pieces like this, because you've got the back made last week. Now you've got some coils to be working on until next weekend. And then next weekend, I'll show you how to capture these individual gemstones. Now, I'm primarily self-taught. With these design of pendants, I'm entirely self-taught. So I can only show you how I've made myself learn to do it. I don't know how other people do it. I'm aware that some people are laying gemstones into a bed and then holding them into position. But the way that I achieved these designs that I've been working on recently is to create small components which you can use in a multiple number of ways. I haven't got it to hand at the moment, but I made a lovely chakra wall hanging utilising a very similar technique, and that's what's going to be coming up in a week's time, hopefully, if life goes to plan. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed the wire coiling gizmo demonstration. Any questions, give me a shout. Any requests for future tutorials, again, please do get in touch with me on Facebook or here on YouTube, however you prefer. And don't forget to join me every other Monday for my Facebook Live over on Gemhawks and Gems Gembox on facebook.com. Have yourselves a lovely day. Do take care, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye for now.